Welcome to the Sporticos Football Stories podcast. It's Friday, the 6th of December, 2024. I'm Craig Resnik-Hanson, and today I'm joined by the great Rory Talks Football. We're getting to Rory's journey as an Arsenal fan, the Emirates live match experience, and so much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our chat with the one and only Rory Talks Football. Hi, Rory. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm a little bit under the weather, but I'm very, very happy to be here with you today. Thanks for coming on. We haven't had an Arsenal fan on for a little bit, actually. So it'll be interesting to see if anything's changed in terms of the fan perspective on things. But before we get into the here and now, for our listeners, could you explain a little bit about how your Arsenal supporting journey started and how you kind of got into the football club?
So I actually grew up about 4 hours away from London, so definitely not a local Arsenal fan. But where I grew up, there's just no Premier League teams anywhere nearby. So, and showing my age, but when I grew up, there was no watching highlights on YouTube or anything like that. So to actually watch and support a football team locally was really difficult, especially because my parents couldn't take me to like the local non-league team, and so when you've only got a match of the day as a tool, kind of ended up picking a Premier League team, and I won't even lie about it. At the time, when I was probably 5 or 6 years old, which was when we were going invincible and playing some of the most beautiful football you could imagine. Thierry Henry was, unbelievable, and that was what got me into Arsenal. So yeah, kind of started supporting then, and then, really looking back, it was quite a poor decision to go with Arsenal and then go through 20 years of not hitting those same heights ever again. But here we are now, and I feel like the patience is finally beginning to pay off.
Well, you never know how it's going to go at the time, do you? I mean, look at the Man United fans; they must have been loving life back in the day, and now they're thinking, "Oh my God, like I wish I'd back City back then, and now I'd be living the dream." But
yeah,
it's always going to go swings and roundabouts. But how has your relationship with Arsenal changed over the years since then? Are you still based where you were then, or are you in London now? Can you go to games now?
Yeah, so fortunately, I kind of always had the dream, I guess, of being able to go to games regularly. So as I was growing up, like once I became a teenager, started kind of funding trips once or twice a season. But obviously, when you live 4 hours away, once you factor in trains and potentially staying overnight in London and stuff, and getting the tickets themselves, it's a very expensive trip. So yeah, I used to go kind of once or twice a season if I was lucky. And then around just after COVID, or the end of COVID, managed to move to London with a job. And yeah, I think for the past nearly 3 years now, I've not missed a home game. So making the most of living locally and being able to go to the games.
Do you remember that first game that you went to at the Emirates?
I do, yeah. It was Aston Villa at home, and we won. Mikel Arteta scored a wonderful free kick, and I remember leaving the game thinking that'll be goal of the weekend on Match of the Day. But it was the same weekend that Peter Crouch scored that unbelievable goal where he chested it and then volleyed it. So it wasn't the best goal of the weekend. But no, that was the first game that I went to with my... it was actually me and my friend, we're both Arsenal fans, and we travelled to London on the megabus because we couldn't even afford the train. And that was the first one, which was mega.
Did the match day experience live up to the hype in your head? Because I guess you've been watching, first match of the day and then later on actually being able to watch live games on TV, I guess. But you probably always hyped up this idea of actually going to the ground. What was it like when you first sort of walked up the steps? You saw everything, you heard everything, you experienced it all. Did it live up to the hype?
Yeah, I think it did. I mean, don't get me wrong, the game itself wasn't kind of one of those big atmosphere kind of days looking back. But yeah, at the time it was, you walk out, you see the pitch for the first time, and that's one thing I kind of not miss, but like I do feel like now, because I go to every game, you almost take it for granted. All of those things that when you went for the first time, it was kind of like almost in awe of it, which is a shame. And I sometimes have to remind myself these days that I'm incredibly lucky to be able to go to as many games as I do, because I know for some people it's not so easy.
What's it like when it is rocking then on a big? Well, tell me for a start, which games are they? Is it a big Champions League night? Is it a North London derby? Which are the games where the atmosphere is at its height, and what is that like?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, I I don't think many things will peak um, the 22-23 season, because that title race, that title challenge came out of nowhere, and that was like every single game the atmosphere was big, and it's so difficult to replicate that now because of the expectations you have. So yeah, I mean, I remember when we went 3-2 up against Bournemouth. Obviously, that was one of the most incredible experiences ever. But yeah, the Champions League nights first last season when we were back in the Champions League. Those Champions League nights were big. Obviously, North London derby is always massive. When we play against City now, the atmosphere is always really good. And yeah, it's and when the atmosphere is up, it's unbelievable. Even last night against United, to be honest, the first half the atmosphere was really poor, even from the United fans as well. And I think actually having away fans to bounce off is quite important. But the atmosphere was really poor in the first half. But then once we went 1-0 up and we found out that Liverpool had dropped points, it really picked up. And when it does, it's just yeah, it's the kind of experience that I just don't think you get anywhere else. Obviously, you get it at other football clubs as well, but outside of football or sport, I just don't think you can replicate it.
Like you said, you need those away fans for that energy. I think it's the same at all levels. I
Yeah,
follow a League Two club, and it's the exact same thing. When you see that the other side of the stadium is full, you know it's going to be one of those games where everyone's up for it.
yeah,
When they've brought a taxi, so to speak,
yeah,
you know that your guys aren't really going to be getting into it either, and it just kind of creates this sort of a little
yeah.
bit of a dull vibe. But speaking about the away side of things, do you get the chance to go to many away games?
No, no, it's difficult. I mean, getting away tickets themselves is incredibly difficult. Like it's a mission enough these days just to get home tickets. So getting the away tickets is really tough. And then, um, yeah, I used to a couple of times previously. I sneaked into, not even sneaked into. I just went into home ends. 'Cause obviously, so I grew up in the Midlands, and so games like West Brom or somewhere like that back in the day, I could go in the home end. But no, never actually. That's the on the bucket list is 100% doing some away days, and I'd love to go and travel with the Champions League away games and do a couple of those, but not yet managed to do it.
But having been to a few of those other grounds where you snuck into the home side, you've got the chance to see sort of what some other grounds are like.
hmm
How would you compare the Emirates to those other grounds?
I mean, compared to the ones I went to, I think the Emirates when it's bouncing is better than all of them. The only one, I mean, I went to Anfield not for an Arsenal game, and it was Liverpool versus Burnley, and I was in the Kop, but I feel like I didn't get an accurate representation of what Anfield can be like. You know, if you imagine what Anfield was like against City at the weekend, it certainly wasn't that in a 3 p.m. kickoff against Burnley. So yeah, Arsenal at its best is the best atmosphere I've ever been in, but I guess I still have more travel to do.
Well, as a content creator, moving a little bit away from the in-stadium experience now, as a content creator, you're obviously online quite a lot. You're interacting with the fan base. Now, every club nowadays, of course, has its in-stadium fan base and its online fan base, and sometimes the two can be very intertwined. Sometimes they're quite different. Sometimes they're quite toxic. You can probably imagine where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
How would you describe the Arsenal online fan base compared to maybe what you see from the outside from other clubs? Because I think not all clubs are as toxic as each other. Some are pretty normal online. How is the Arsenal fan base online?
Yeah, it depends what sort of community you look at. So for me personally, like my sort of community is more representative, I think, of match-going fans in terms of being level-headed and understanding the process and how it works. I think you obviously get corners of the Arsenal fan base on the internet that are, yeah. not in tune, I would say, with the match going fans in terms of rarely. I mean, you go to games and you get a completely different impression sometimes of the feeling, especially towards the manager. Um, at times when there's parts of the fan base that are Arteta out, and you just don't hear that at the game. And maybe there are some people at the game that have that feeling, but they don't vocalize it. Um, so certain players that the online fan base kind of can turn against sometimes, that get a lot of support in the stadium. So yeah, the main thing I would say is that the match going fans tend to just be more supportive. And that's not to say that people that don't go to the games aren't supportive. It's just there's that small little section that think that we should sack everyone, and I don't know what the plan is after that, but that's what they think.
Yeah, it's definitely a phenomenon with all clubs. I don't know exactly why. I think maybe it's a separation from it, I guess, a little bit, but there's definitely a lot more sort of trigger happy vibes
Yeah.
on X, for example, than there are in the ground.
Oh yeah. Yeah, 100%. And also there's a market for it. There's a market for being an Arsenal fan, supposedly, that kind of rips Arsenal apart and then gets views and likes from all of the rival fans. And you can monetize that these days. So they say things and do things that they certainly wouldn't get away with doing at the stadium.
Yeah, and I think all clubs have them. We
Oh
could
yeah.
name them for sure, but and Arsenal have some pretty famous examples themselves. But I get the impression, obviously, that that's not your kind of lane. How would you describe your content as far as giving Arsenal fans what they want, but without going down that toxic route that, like you say, can be quite lucrative?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was always a case of, when I started making the content, I don't really know I mean, there was never a plan for me to get into content, really. I just started kind of posting my opinion, and it went from there. But for me, I mean, one thing I like to do is kind of just be relatively informational, like create content that just, informs people about what's going on. And then I would say I'm a positive Arsenal fan. I'm massively, massively behind Mikel Arteta. Some people would say it's toxic positivity. I don't think it is. I think it's just support. But like for me, and maybe it's because of the era that I've supported the club, where you know I wasn't really a fully fledged football fan as a 5 or 6 year old when we were invincible, and so most of my experience of supporting Arsenal has been tough, and we'd win FA Cups here and there, but we haven't won a league title in 20 years, and I now look at it and I just think this is the best I've seen Arsenal play. We've not lost a game in the Premier League to a Big Six team in like over 500 days. And I just think, sometimes people need to be careful what they wish for and understand that it's not quite as simple as if you don't win a title, you should be sacked, and that there's a long-term thing building here. And I'm supportive of it. So yeah, my content generally is happy, it is supportive, and informational.
Yeah, like you said, what you come up on will kind of define how you feel about it going forward. Like if you were a Man City fan who, I don't know, lived through the 20 years of kind of, nothingness until they started winning, then you would basically, you would have Guardiola for the next 50 years if he won nothing ever again.
Yeah.
You're done. You're set with happiness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're 8 years old now, then you're like, what's going on? Now we're not winning. Like
Yeah,
we've won five in a row. This is terrible. Get
exactly.
this guy out. So it's totally normal. But let's talk about Mikel Arteta then, because as you said, you lived through a lot of dark times. I mean, there was a really long period there. I think people probably don't remember just how toxic it was at Arsenal for quite a long time
Yeah.
before Arteta has turned it around. I mean, how would you describe the feeling around the club, the feeling around the fan base, and the connection between the supporters and Mikel Arteta?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the connection's the best it's ever been. One game I vividly remember before I'd moved to London was the game against Crystal Palace, where Granit Xhaka got subbed off and sarcastically applauded the fans and got booed off and threw his shirt to the ground. And That was probably reaching the most toxic that I've seen the club. And the turnaround since then, since Arteta came in, the turnaround of players, I think there's a big element that he's focused on, which is the mentality of the players that we've got. And you can tell that, the Arsenal fan base is properly supportive of the individual players as much as the project. And the best way I could describe it, in terms of at least how the feeling is within match-going fans, was that at the end of last season, the final day of the season, where of course we could have won the league possibly on the final day if the results had gone in our favour. Actually, the second that the news came through that Man City had won their game and that we hadn't won the title, the first thing that happened in the stadium was that the entire stadium started singing Mikel Arteta's name. And I think that, for me, was like a real demonstration of how, but at least the match-going fans are just fully behind him and the project. And it has, like, I mean, we've lost 3 games in the Premier League in 2024, and going to games week in, week out, more often than not, by a long way, I'm leaving the stadium with a smile on my face and I'm happy. And there was a long period of time where it was completely hit and miss for that sort of thing. So I think the fact that we've got expectations to be winning the title kind of speaks volumes, because we went 15 or 20 years without really even having those expectations. There was the odd season here or there where we came close, but yeah, I think we're in a really good place. And if you take out that kind of minority on social media, it's good.
Yeah, I think Arteta's really raised the bar, but this has been kind of a crazy season so far. The start of this one, I mean, nobody would have seen what's going on with City, for example. I don't think anybody would have seen Liverpool starting just quite as well as they had. What are you hoping for from the rest of this season from an Arsenal perspective? Because, there is still quite a gap there. It's been shortened, as you said. Do you still hold out hope of challenging Liverpool, or are you just hoping for a long run in the Champions League? What's your kind of, I guess, optimistic hope for the rest of this campaign?
Yeah, all of it. I think we're definitely capable of going on a run. We know we're capable of going on a run. The sort of run that we had from the start of 2024 up until we lost against Bournemouth was an unbelievable run. We lost one game in, what was it, one game in 24 or something crazy. So I know we're capable of going on a run. I know Liverpool are capable of dropping points where you wouldn't expect them to. I think the start to the season that we've had has kind of been. It hasn't really painted the full picture in terms of I wouldn't expect us to be picking up, 3 red cards in 7 games like we did at the start of the season. I wouldn't expect us to have the same sort of injury problems that we've had through the start of the season. And don't get me wrong, we've never had like a mega injury crisis all at one time, but I think there's just been this constant cycle of having 2, 3, 4 players out missing. Obviously, Ødegaard was the big one that did cost us points, I think, but even outside of that, it's the constant, even last night, Gabriel and Calafiori missing. We can't seem to string a series of games together where we've kind of got a full strength starting 11 to play. So if we can get that together, I think we could go on a run. I expect Liverpool to drop more points, especially in some tough away games. And so I do think we can challenge Liverpool. And look, ultimately, the way I'm looking at it is, obviously, it depends on what City and to an extent Chelsea do, but if we can keep ourselves, or we can get ourselves to within 3 points of Liverpool by the time we go to Anfield, and we go to Anfield on game week 36, if we can be within 3 points by then it's back in our hands. And so, that's only 4 points. That's Liverpool drawing 2 games that we win between now and then. So there's plenty of time in the Premier League. Champions League, I do expect us to go on a deep run in the Champions League. I think getting top 8 now is definitely achievable, and if you get top 8, I think that sets you up really nicely to go deep in the competition. So yeah, Champions League, I'm expecting really semi-finals at a minimum, and then we're in both of the cups. Carabao Cup, we've got Crystal Palace in the next round. Win that, which we should, and you're into the semi-finals. And then obviously FA Cup, we drew United, which was frustrating, but again, I think last night showed that we can probably beat them comfortably. And so yeah, look, we're in all of the competitions. We're certainly not out of any of those competitions. So for me, we need to win a trophy. I think we're definitely capable of winning one of those trophies, and then really it's just a case of making sure that we challenge right until the end for all of them.
Rory, before we go, I'm going to put you on the spot. What is the best thing about being an Arsenal fan?
The best thing about being an Arsenal fan. It is. Whoa, what is the best thing about being an Arsenal fan? It's supporting the biggest team in London, the capital city. You get to go to the games and know that you are supporting the biggest and best team in London. And we play the best football, and we're the classiest club in the Premier League. So there's a lot to hold on to and cherish.
Very, very nice. Where can our listeners get a hold of your content, Rory?
Just Rory Talks Football, pretty much anywhere really. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Just don't mistake me for the other Rory that talks about football, and you'll be fine.
Oh yeah, don't mistake you for that one.
Yeah.
Okay, Rory, thanks so much for coming on, mate. I really, really appreciate it. It's been a lovely little chat with you, and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for listening to the Sporticos Football Stories podcast. It was such a pleasure talking to Rory. We can't wait to bring you more chats with fans from across the footballing landscape, from ex-pros to bloggers, YouTubers, and much more. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing. If you really liked it, give us a 5-star review wherever you get your pods. That will really help us out so much. Thanks again, and catch you next time on the Sporticos Football Stories podcast.